evening. As was mentioned in the notice, we're going to be discussing the rail trail issue here in Santa Cruz County. And for some reason, for whatever reason, this is a very complicated and contentious issue. And so I would just like to hear the facts on this issue so that I and others can make an informed decision. So we're going to be hearing from speakers from Greenway, and we're going to hear from a speaker from No Way Greenway. Seems only fair. And we've asked the speakers to really just give us the facts. I know it's hard to keep emotions out sometimes, but sometimes there's a lot of noise and you can't really hear the facts. So it's important that we hear the facts. And each speaker will speak for 20 minutes. And then we'll have a 20-minute question and answer period. And I'm asking the attendees to put your questions in the Q&A section in Zoom. And we've asked the speakers, oh geez, why did I do that? We asked the speakers to just tell us what your vision is. What is this all about, in your opinion? And what is the time frame? And I think all of that will fall in the vision. And I understand that a ballot measure has come forth. But again, talk about that and yeah, all kinds of things that are new to me. But I'm really interested in hearing about this issue. So we will start with Bud. Bud, I don't see you. Oh, there you are. Bud Colligan. Thank you for being with us tonight, Bud. You're muted.
Muted, Bud.
You need to enable screen sharing so I could pull up my slides.
Okay. Okay,
Oh, there.
try it.
That should work. Yeah. Okay. Let me go into presentation mode. Okay. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let me just set my timer here so I know how much time I've taken.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, good. Sorry about that phone. I'll stop ringing in a second. Good evening, and thank you for hosting us this evening. Thank you, Sally, for being here as well. I want to start by introducing myself to you. My name is Bud Colligan. I'm a 25-year resident of Santa Cruz and have spent the last 10 years working on community and nonprofit projects in healthcare, the arts, education, affordable housing, and homelessness. During this time, I co-founded the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, whose mission is to create a thriving region for all through focus on the economy, equity, and the environment. In 1998, almost 25 years ago, I co-founded Pacific Community Ventures in the Bay Area, which invests in and advises businesses in underserved communities. It was the first of that type of organization really ever founded. I served 8 years on the Leadership Council of Opportunity Fund, which is the largest microlender in the nation, primarily to women and minority-owned small businesses. More recently, I started the nonprofit Monterey Bay Housing Trust to increase the supply of affordable housing in our region. I was the first investor in Digital Nest in Watsonville, and I collaborated with Jacob Martinez on its first business plan. I'm telling you about myself because I want you to know that I come from a place of equity, inclusion, and caring about issues that lead to a just society. And I would say this is true for the people involved in Greenway. It's a very large group now. 10,000 folks signed in Santa Cruz County, signed our petition for Greenway in 2018 that we delivered to the RTC. And 13,000 now have been certified signatures by the county clerk. And there will be a Greenway initiative on the June 7th ballot. We've had 2 elections, not the entire county, but Measure L in Capitola and the first district supervisor election in District 1, where the rail and trail was a central issue. 210 doctors and medical professionals endorsed Greenway, disability rights advocates and environmental leaders, Dignity Health and Dominican Hospital, the Santa Cruz County Business Council, which 86% of the members and 94%, if you include abstentions, voted in favor of Greenway. Bike and board manufacturers and shops and over 500 community leaders endorsed Greenway on its website. What's our plan? Our plan is fairly simple. It's to combine active transportation with improved Metro and Paracruz, Highway 1 bus on shoulder, and SoCal Drive improvements to get people moving. This is a picture of what Greenway would look like near 41st Avenue. You can see O'Neill's in the background. The Greenway plan is inclusive, safe, and affordable. It's a wide multi-use trail. It's safe transit for commuting, recreation, and community building. There are no detours in Greenway, as in the other plan, where there's 6 miles on unsafe streets. It preserves trees and ecological diversity in the corridor. It separates into 2 paths, cyclists from walkers, dogs, and strollers. It's ADA compliant with safe pathway for wheelchairs and disabilities, and no trains close to pedestrians, children, and wheelchairs. It preserves future rail options through rail banking, and the Greenway initiative has no impact on tracks north of the San Lorenzo Bridge. The initiative specifically calls out the space from the San Lorenzo Bridge to Lee Road, including no impact on the beach train, which you probably heard a lot about in the last couple weeks. There are no new taxes. It's paid for with the existing Measure D funds, and 100% of the 32-mile trail can be implemented in the next 3 to 5 years. What do we say about public transit? Well, we prefer common sense solutions now. Public transit is an essential part of Greenway's plan. This has been on our website for years to improve and modernize Metro and Paracruz and support Lift Line. As I mentioned, bus on shoulder on Highway 1, which is funded and is in progress. Adaptive signal control on SoCal and Freedom, which is funded and in process, along with other improvements for cars, bikes, and pedestrians on SoCal Drive. 84 buses per day now run between Watsonville and Santa Cruz. Metro does stop near our large employers like Dominican Hospital and UCSC and Cabrillo College. But we want to see more. We want to see Wi-Fi on all our buses, not just the buses on Highway 17, improved online geolocation of buses and arrival times, on-demand Paracruz. Right now, Metro offers Paracruz to those that live within 3/4 miles of a bus stop. But why? Why shouldn't Paracruz be available to our disabled community wherever they live in Santa Cruz County? And free bus passes for low-income students and from businesses. All of this can be done with the $53 million a year that we spend on Metro, with better strategy and better implementation. But no new taxes, and it's paid for with existing Measure D funds. You have to ask yourself, as I've outlined our plan, how did we get here? What's happened in the last 15 years that our rail corridor remains empty? And the answer is that we spent a ton of time on studies, we've lost a lot of time, and there is no money to implement a train despite repeated attempts to find it. We've had 9 studies since 1983. The train, as the RTC said in April, is not financially feasible. Our population is too small. The SMART train in Sonoma Marin is failing with 3 times the population and a large metro area as a destination point in San Francisco. The ridership forecasts here are also very small, especially from Watsonville, only 300 round trips per day. That, to put that number in context, there's 100,000 cars that go north and south every day. So there's almost no traffic relief on Highway 1, despite what people say. And tracks and proposed stations are not near our major employers. From the tracks to Dominican Hospital is 1.7 miles. To UCSC is 3.3 miles. To Cabrillo is about 1.5 miles. So the utility of a train in those locations is not high. And the proposed train fares are 2 to 3 times bus fares. So when we talk about low-income riders, we have to think about train fares. Santa Cruz simply does not have the $1.3 billion to fund and operate a train. Right now, we can't fix our roads. We can barely fix our infrastructure. We have a huge homeless problem. We have a huge issue with rent and affordable housing. We have a big issue right now with Watsonville Hospital and healthcare, for broadband access, for education for our kids. And so we have to be practical and look at what's actually possible. And we have a great solution right in front of us. We need to learn from the similar failed light rail experiments and systems, the SMART in Sonoma Marin, the West Side Express in Portland, and the VTA in San Jose. I also think the rail trail lacks inclusivity. The planned detours onto unsafe streets for 6 miles, and a discontinuous trail means dramatically lower capacity to realize a vision of hundreds of thousands, over 2 million people per year using the trail. And Watsonville really gets no trail. At Buena Vista, it detours onto San Andreas and West Beach with cars going 50 miles per hour. It's less safe as cyclists, walkers, dogs, and strollers mix. A fence cuts off neighborhoods and beach access because federal rules require a fence between a rail line and a trail. And this reminds us a lot of freeways that were put through poor neighborhoods in the 60s and 70s. It cuts hundreds of heritage trees. And I ask you all listening, do you want to walk, run, and bike next to trains, 30 to 60 trains per day? It's just a common human question that we need to ask ourselves. Social equity to me means access for everyone. If train fares are unaffordable for low income, the train fare, a similar train fare for the SMART train in Santa Rosa to Novato, it's a 20-mile distance, it's $15 per day round trip. And yes, there are discounts for seniors and students at half that rate. But at $15 per day, someone needs to pay the full rate. It's usually our workers. And that's annualized at $3,465 a year. So for the 8,400 farm workers in Watsonville who make $30,000 a year, are they going to pay 10% of their income? Do they need a train? And the same for healthcare workers, retail workers, and those working in supermarkets, about 4,000. They make on average $32,000 a year. And then we have issues of health and mental health, high diabetes rates and obesity. We need more exercise and outdoors options for them. There are few recreational opportunities, particularly in South County. We have a big mental health problem, increasingly with the pandemic. People need access to nature, the beaches and the sloughs. And a regressive sales tax to fund a train South County pays disproportionately for the service it doesn't use. 88% of the forecasted train ridership, according to the RTC's passenger rail feasibility study, comes from North and Mid County. We are all interdependent. We want to enhance connection and focus on real issues of affordable housing, jobs, education, and healthcare. Everyone has the right to access this corridor, and yet this is a picture from Live Oak, and yet it has remained empty. And I think by looking at this picture, you get a real sense of the challenges of building this corridor, a trail next to a train. There has been no freight on this rail line since the Cemex plant closed about 15 years ago. There is no freight in North County. We have had 3 failed operators on this line: Sierra Northern, Iowa Pacific, and then Progressive Rail. And they all came with very high and rosy projections of how they were going to introduce freight onto the line. And none of them have succeeded. And so it's time to face reality and do what would be absolutely fantastic, which is to build a wide multi-use trail on this corridor that over 2 million people every year would use. So Greenway is proposing that we look to the future, not the past, that we optimize our transportation in 3 corridors to move the most people for what Santa Cruz County residents can afford and maintain in a reasonable period of time. There are tremendous wins behind the sales of e-bikes and other bikes. I was out this week at Arana Gulch, and I'd never seen so many bikers and walkers using our public facilities. And that's what will happen if we build Greenway. We will have an explosion of use. People will decide not to do their errands by car when they have trips that are 3 to 5 miles. They will commute to UCSC and Cabrillo College on the Greenway and connect to other trails. They will access the beaches and the sloughs. They will have time to socialize and build community in our community. These are the kinds of things that Greenway supports, and I really thank you for the opportunity to present tonight, and would be happy to answer any questions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bud. I appreciate it. And again, I want to remind folks to please put any questions in the question and answer section tonight so that we can get them answered. We'll get them as many answered as we can. Okay. All right. So now we're going to hear from Sally Arnold of No Way Greenway. And Sally, you have 20 minutes. And again, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A because the chat moves very quickly and we'll miss your questions if you put any in the chat. So please put them in the Q&A. Thanks. Sally, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting us to come tonight. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background and a little update on where we are, and then end with some actions that you could take as individuals or as an organization. So first of all, who am I? Why am I here? Why are we talking about transit? This is a little bit of, I'm a retired school teacher, and then you can see here the things that I am doing in my retirement, which sort of surprises me. I didn't expect to become a transit activist in my retirement, but I think that transit really hits a lot of issues that I care about: health and safety for children, the environment, our quality of life, economic development, and equity. And so I found that by working on this issue, I could really, it sounds like it's about a train and a trail, but it's about these deeper things. And I think Mr. Colligan touched on some of those deeper things as well. Anyway, so I think I don't know a lot of you, but I think I saw some of you at the Martin Luther King Day event at the Resource Center for Nonviolence last month, and it was really nice that we had the opportunity to speak there. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I want to acknowledge that on Friday it was Rosa Parks' birthday, and there was Transit Equity Day, and that a lot of our community was out there talking about why abundant transit unlocks the freedom of movement. And when people benefit from greater economic mobility and lower household costs, their lives improve. And I think everybody here knows that transit has really been at the center of the movement for a very long time. And here in Santa Cruz County, we have a real history of transit because this rail line was built along our coast back in the 19th century, and then the development grew up along the tracks. And that's why today about half our county lives within 1 mile of the tracks. Likewise, we have 92 parks and 44 schools within 1 mile of the tracks. One of the things that public transit needs to be successful is density. And surprisingly, near the tracks, we have urban densities that are comparable to Oakland and Portland. It's just kind of surprising. We think of our community as, being rural, and a lot of the county is, but near the tracks, it's really rather urban. Of course, now we know the 20th century brought a different vision of transportation, and we're living with the results today. We know the less expensive homes are in Watsonville, the jobs and educational opportunities are in Santa Cruz, and the terrible traffic on Highway 1 in between means it can take up to 90 minutes to travel between Watsonville and Santa Cruz. Workers are late and stressed out due to work. They're late to work and they're stressed out because of the traffic, and people are spending less time with their families because they're stuck in traffic. Local businesses are struggling to retain workers, and the people of Watsonville are bearing the greatest share of this burden. And the Greenway plan to retain that little bit of Watsonville track going out to Monterey County and to retain the little bit of track by the boardwalk and remove the track in the middle is like transportation redlining, separating Watsonville from Santa Cruz and dooming South County people to continue to sit in this traffic. They might sit in it in their own private car, or if they can't afford it, they might sit in it in a bus, but they're going to be sitting in this traffic. And, we have safety issues, of course. We have a very high rate of bike commuters in the state, but we also have a very high rate of death and serious injury, both for cyclists and for pedestrians. And that's why Friends of the Rail and Trail has been consistently advocating first to purchase this rail corridor and then to build a trail, because all the trail benefits that Mr. Colligan so elegantly outlined are coming to us because the trail plan is being implemented. And we need it because especially timid cyclists and new cyclists need a safe, traffic-free place to practice and gain confidence. Now, of course, there's the climate crisis. And we all know that, burning fossil fuels is the problem. And in our county, transportation accounts for half of our greenhouse gas emissions. So if locally we're going to take any action to affect our climate emissions, it's going to have to be changing our transportation. And that doesn't mean more cars or more buses. It means electric light rail. Now, I want to be clear, there was something in some of the questions we were sent that made it sound like the rail and trail was like my idea, or it was the Fort project or something. And to be clear, it's the project of record for our county. Okay, the Monterey Bay Scenic Sanctuary Trail is approved by all the local jurisdictions through which it will pass. Fort just is supporting the approved project. And you can see both a schematic and an actual real life experience of it here. And I want to talk a little bit about the notion of, how horrible it's going to be biking or walking next to trains. You can see an example of the kind of rail we'll probably get, which is like an all-electric, very quiet light rail. And frankly, as a cyclist who does bike on the roads, I would much rather be passed maybe every 15 minutes by one quiet electric train that's going to stay on the tracks, and it holds, say, 50 to 100 people, than being passed by 50 to 100 individual drivers, half of whom are texting and swerving into the bike lane. It would be much safer for me as a cyclist. So what's happening? What's the plan here, this plan of record? The plan is we first build the trail. And it's going to be 32 miles long, and it's going to connect Watsonville to Davenport. And it's going to connect those schools, it's going to connect the parks, and it's going to connect 50% of the county that lives within a mile of that rail corridor. That's the first part of the plan. Second, we use the existing tracks for zero emission light rail. Yeah, they're old, they need to be fixed up, but it's kind of like saying, well, my house is old and needs a new roof, so, you know, do you fix the roof or do you tear it down? Of course, you just fix it. And that's the situation we're in right now. And the plan for passenger rail is to run between Santa Cruz and Watsonville. There might be some kind of tourist excursion running up to Davenport on the weekends or something, but that's not really the primary transportation spine for our community. And then we do need buses to get us to those places that are not close to the tracks. And so we need buses to meet us at every tram stop and then take us deeper into the county to places that people need to go. And if you schedule it so that the bus is there to meet the train, it's called pulse scheduling. You could have at a transit stop 2 or 3 buses going to 2 or 3 destinations that are just waiting for the train to arrive and passengers disembark. That's how the Capital Corridor connects with the 17 bus. And I don't know if anybody here has ever taken that bus train connection, but it over to, say, Sacramento from here. It works really well. And then, of course, we need our streets to be made safe for cyclists and pedestrians. That's what the active transportation plan for our county is working on, making sure that we have expanded personal mobility choices so that we can get to buses and trains safely. And this is all in support, of course, of carbon-free mobility. So what's going on? Well, the trail is actually being built, and many of you have probably seen some of these segments. The first one to be completed was the San Lorenzo River Trestle. This was completed in, I want to say 2019, came in ahead of schedule and under budget, and it's won 4 design awards. And for those of us who live near the river, it's changed the way we can get back and forth between the east side and the west side. It's really helped people who don't want to drive get back and forth much more efficiently. And the west side segment of the trail has also been completed. Again, if you live on the west side, you know that this segment that goes from the intersection of Bay and California all the way out to the edge of town has been fabulous. It allows people to get around and without getting in their cars. I see people with their grocery bags. I see people with, teaching their kids how to ride their bikes. One day I saw a guy in an electric wheelchair and 4 unicyclists all going down the trail together. I mean, it's amazing how many people are using it. And it is just a wonderful place for people to connect in the neighborhood. And it is providing all those wonderful health benefits that, that Mr. Colligan so nicely outlined for us. Now, there's also a segment that's been built in Watsonville, and it connects those slough trails. And that one was just finished last spring. And we also then have the next segment to be built will be this one. It's the segment that connects the Bay and California intersection to the wharf. It's going out to bid probably this month. It's going to be built this year. And this is going to really, again, if you're a West Sider, you know that people in Beach Flats, when they're walking their kids to school, they're either walking up that kind of slimy, slick seep on Laurel Street, where it's very steep and slippery, or they are, or you have to go up through the Dream Inn, where especially in the summer, oh my gosh, the tourists are like driving the wrong way on the street. It's pretty dangerous to be a pedestrian or a cyclist. And so this segment's going to really, again, be a game changer, particularly for the Beach Flats community. The next segment that is of interest is the segment on the North Coast. It's going to connect Wilder Ranch and Davenport. And this segment is designed, it's fully funded. We got federal grant, a federal lands access program grant. And so we're in the queue for that construction, and that'll be the lead agency, and they're expecting to break ground probably in 2024 on that section. So, it takes a long time to bring any kind of public infrastructure project from, I have a thought, to going through all the environmental design and all the engineering and all the reviews and the permitting. And, that's like years and years of work. And then the moment when the shovel hits the ground, that most of us see, we think, oh, that's when it started. It's like, no, the construction piece is the short part. And we are just at the moment where shovels are going to be hitting the ground on a lot of these segments very soon. There's this whole series of segments that connect Seabright to State Park Drive, basically running through the east side and mid-county. And those segments are currently in that environmental review and design phase. When those sections are completed, we're going to be seeing a connection between the Seabright, the Yacht Harbor, the Boys and Girls Club, Capitola Village, the Live Oak Schools, several state beaches. They're all going to be accessible by trail. It's really, again, going to change the way people could move around our county, and it's going to be fantastic. Now, what about the train? Here's the deal. Bikes and trains really play well together. And it's actually proven, they've done studies on this, that when you put bike infrastructure and train infrastructure together, more people do both. More people ride their bikes, more people ride their trains, ride the train, and more people are leaving their cars behind. And they even have a name for it, bike, train, bike, or sometimes they call it BITTY-B. And so this is one of the reasons that the Bicycle Advisory Committee to this RTC and Bike Santa Cruz County are all supporting rail transit on the corridor. It helps cycling. And of course, level boarding allows for independent roll-on, roll-off access. And that's not just for people in wheelchairs, but canes, walkers, families pushing strollers, the blind, even cyclists like me. I'm not like a totally buff cyclist, and I've got a pretty heavy old bike. And for me to lift that bike onto one of those racks on the front of the Metro bus, that's a job. But just to roll it into a train, it would totally expand how far I could go. And, I wouldn't ride my bike all the way to Watsonville, but I'd roll my bike onto a train and get off in Watsonville and then ride to my final destination. It's for all of us, that person in the wheelchair. Yeah, they could roll on the trail for a little while, but 20 miles to Watsonville? I don't think so. Adding a train to the mix expands all our range. This is why the Elderly and Disabled Transportation Advisory Committee to the RTC also support rail transit on the corridor. Of course, there's reducing the carbon emissions. RTC has studied it, and they say that if we implement rail, it's going to be equal to planting 61,000 trees every year, because the number of people who will not take car trips, but instead be on clean light rail, every year that system's in place, another 61,000 trees equality. So that's a significant impact on our local carbon emissions. And this is the reason the Sierra Club, Regeneración Pájaro Valley, and Youth for Climate Justice are all supporting passenger rail on the corridor. Why do so many people want to ride rail? Well, it's time certain. Think about how long it can take you to drive from Watsonville to Santa Cruz. And then look at these travel times. I mean, they're unbeatable. And, especially during that 90-minute commute time, at heavy traffic. And it's certainly faster than any of us can walk or bike on the trail. I mean, absolutely. There are some people who are super fit and they will be happy to, bike 20 miles to go out to dinner in Watsonville, or if they live in Watsonville, bike 20 miles to work 8 hours in Santa Cruz and bike 20 miles home. But that's not everybody. So for all these reasons, the Regional Transportation Commission studied this and found that by adding passenger rail to our transit system, we could actually increase the people using any kind of public transit in our county by 25%. It increases metro ridership too, because of that connection between buses and trains. People would take the train for the long haul down the length of the county, and then the bus for the short hop if they have to for someplace further. And the other thing to be aware of is, we are part of something a lot bigger. This is not just Santa Cruz County. I mean, yeah, it's going to help us move around the county, but if you look at the image on the left, that is the Transit Agency of Monterey County's plan for what they call around the bay rail service. And you can see our green line, the kind of vertical line near the top of that image, that is our rail line. It's a key part of this regional system. And then if you look at the image on the right, that's the state rail plan. And again, if you look for Santa Cruz, you'll see our little branch line is a piece of that system. And this is not just going to help us, like, I can go, visit my cousin in Salinas by train now or something, but think of all the tourists who come to Santa Cruz from Gilroy and Hollister and Castroville, all the places you see on this map. Imagine if a big chunk of them were coming by rail instead. They could get dropped off right in the key tourist spots, Aptos Village, Capitola Village, the Boardwalk, without their cars. Watsonville becomes a big transit hub. It's going to be great for economic development in Watsonville, and we get the tourist dollars without the traffic. It's going to be a great boon to us. And the other agencies in the area, like the Monterey area Transit Agency of Monterey County and AMBAC, are depending on us to do our part of this. Now, I know in the email I was sent, I was asked, tell us how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. And I have to say that the answers to these questions are going to depend to some extent on the actions of the minority of influential residents in our county who are trying to stop the project. The more obstacles they put up, the longer it's going to take and the more expensive it's going to be. And some of those studies that were referred to in the previous presentation were insisted on by the opposition because they thought that those studies would show that their plan was better. But every study shows that rail and trail together is the best study. And then they say, oh, that's a bad study, let's do another one. So yeah, there have been delays and there are reasons for that. In any case, an accurate assessment of cost happens during the design and environmental review phase of any major project. And without that, any number that any of us put forward here about any project is really just a guess. The point is not, is it going to be expensive? Yeah, it's going to be expensive. All transit projects are expensive. Schools are expensive. Parks are expensive. The question is, what kind of project do we want for our community? That's the question to be asking. So our vision is popular. A poll was done last winter by FM3. They're a professional polling company. They're the group that gets hired when school boards want to put out a bond, or Measure D. RTC hired them for the Measure D ballot measure. Anyway, they polled on this plan of record. Again, it's not my plan. It's not the Fort plan. It's the plan for our county. That's the plan of record that's being implemented. And it's got really strong support, 74%. And so that's wonderful. And then if you look here, that strong support is across all the supervisorial districts. And it's across all the demographics. I know the printing is kind of small here, but if you look at the bottom of those blue bars, you can see it's popular regardless of age, gender, political party, race, economic status, proximity to the rail line. Our county wants trail with rail. We want it all, and we can have it all. It's the plan right now, is to get it all. It's so popular that a lot of local businesses and organizations are supporting the project. You can see some of their logos here, and on our website, this is a screenshot from our website. We link to all these supporters of the project because we want to show that it does have really strong, broad community support. And of course, we would love it if the NAACP wanted to support it too. And we'd love it if you would subscribe to get updates, follow us on social media, invite us to speak. I'm here now, but you might belong to some other group, like your PTA or your church group or whatever. We'll go anywhere, and we are happy to present. Now, this is usually where my presentation would end. But the opponents of transit have dragged this popular community project into the political arena. So now there's a chapter 2, and that's the Greenway initiative. So, everybody knows the project's popular. So
Sally?
Yeah?
I'm sorry, but your time is up.
Oh, darn it. Okay. Thank you for letting me know.
20 minutes.
Gosh, and I timed it before I went, but I guess I just got too chatty. Oh, well, thank you.
All righty. Thank you. Can you stop sharing your screen? Okay. Thank you, Sally, and thank you, Bud. Jane, can you go through the questions? I see we have 17 questions in the Q&A. So let's get to some.
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to be even-handed in choosing these questions. So first, one is, and this is a question for Bud. Maybe I'll just alternate between presenters. But you mentioned the distance from the rail to Cabrillo, Dominican, and UCSD as a negative for using rail transit. How would Greenway provide better access to those destinations?
Well, I think that obviously if you're on your bike, using a bike, as Sally said as well, it just as it goes together with the rail plan, it also goes together with the bus plan. We see bikes on the front of buses, but particularly with the decreased price of e-bikes, particularly for UCSC students going up the hill like that, e-bikes are coming down, you know, and we could put together low-income loan programs for folks that, and there already exist actually for people who want to buy e-bikes. So I think that, as I said, the technology, you know, a computer used to cost, well, sometimes it still costs depending upon how much memory you get and everything. But you know, when computers first came out, they were $5,000, $10,000, and now you can get a computer for under $1,000. And I think that the same is all the same technology, all the transistors, all the chips are going into e-bikes, and that is a way of connecting between the trail through safe, protected bike paths up to other locations.
Great, thank you. This is a question for each of you. This concept of rail banking, you know, a lot of us probably don't know what that means, and some folks think that that will remove the possibility of you using rail forever in the future, and other people think that it may be a way of preserving the rail line, so it could come back at some later time once everything's lined up. So Sally, I'll start with you and ask for a few comments on rail banking, and then ask Bud to also comment on that concept.
Yeah, absolutely. So rail banking, it sounds like it's a bank where you're going to put your tracks and then later you'll get more tracks when you take them out again, but that's not how it works. What it is it's a federal legal maneuver that allows for tracks to be taken out of the federal system and so they can be torn up. And in the last 40 years, about 25,000 miles have been torn up. Some of those have been paved into trail, like, you know, a really fine trail like what Bud's picture shows. The thing is of those places where tracks were torn up and a paved trail put down, 0 miles have ever been returned to transit. So it preserves the continuity of the corridor, but it doesn't allow, I mean, I guess legally, theoretically, you could, you know, tear out the whole Greenway and then rebuild all the tracks and then bring transit back. But you can imagine how long that would take and how expensive that would be. So basically, it means no transit for us. So, you know, if you don't want to see transit in our future, then you would definitely want to vote for the Greenway initiative. But if you want the transit option, you do not want to rail bank those tracks.
Well, of course, I disagree with Sally on this one. Rail banking was amended the National Trail Systems Act in 1983. And as Sally has said, 25,000 miles, hundreds of communities across the nation have used rail banking to preserve. It does basically two things. It preserves the integrity and the easements on the corridor, because rail corridors have a lot of easements associated with them. And secondly, it protects local communities from liability from easement lawsuits. Those are two very important things. And that's why the RTC staff, not Greenway, has said that the Santa Cruz branch line and the Felton line should essentially be rail banked. Rail banking does not require tracks to be pulled. And about 10 corridors that have been rail banked have actually come back to rail operations. Sally is now says paved, because before they were saying that none came back at all. And then they decided, well, oh yes, some gravel ones came back, but not paved ones. So we'll have to go back and do more investigation about paved ones, because this is a new little twist on the story. But the reason these corridors don't come back is because of economics. Our economy and our transportation system has changed enormously in the last 30 to 50 years. And communities love their trails. I guarantee you, if we build Greenway, this community will be in love with it, because over 2 million people a year will be using it. And the fact that the corridors don't come back to rail operations is simply because there is no freight here, and there hasn't been any freight here since the Cemex plant closed in Northern California. I'm sorry, but I can't make the economy function in a certain way. It's just not functioning that way anymore. And therefore, it behooves us to move forward and do the things we can with the money that we have.
Thank you, Bud. I'm going to ask a question from Sean Shroom, who and ask this question of both of you. We are Afro-Native and have a long history of other people telling us what's best for us and keeping us apart. Justify for us tonight, and this is a perception of asking a group of people of color how it is better for us to help you take something away from another group of people of color in Watsonville. That may be a common perception that's worth addressing from both sides. Can you take this one first, Bud, and then we'll go to Sally?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say is we're not taking anything away. In fact, we're trying to offer a new facility that will be great for Watsonville families. I spend a lot of time in Watsonville working in the arts, in training kids, in scholarships for first-generation college students, in a lot of other programs in Watsonville, the pump track at Ramsey Park, etc. And when I talk to families down there, the train is actually like the 10th thing on their list. Most of the people, if you ask them about the train, they know nothing about it. What they do know is that their streets are unsafe, their sidewalks are unsafe, they don't have great recreational opportunities for their children. There's no public swimming pool in Watsonville, as an example. And so Greenway is actually trying to offer something that can be delivered in the next 3 to 5 years versus a dream that is not funded, has no prospect of being funded, and will take 20 or 25 years to implement. So from our standpoint, we're not trying to take anything away at all. We're trying to increase opportunities for health, for safety, and for recreation.
Sally?
Well, I would say that tearing up the tracks between Watsonville and Santa Cruz is taking something away. But, you know, there you go. And of course, that all those trail benefits come with the rail and trail combination. And we have, and that trail is under construction right now. I mean, 3 to 5 years, I don't know. You have to start all those planning processes over again. You know, if the amount of time it took to get this plan organized, which was about 8 years, is any indication, just for redoing all the plans and environmental review, we're talking 8 years. And then we can start thinking about tearing up the tracks. Oh, wait, we have to do that legal thing, rail banking, and then do a lot of lawsuits. Okay, we do that for a few years. Then we tear up the tracks and expose all those toxins and dispose of all that waste. And so there's that expense. Then we can start constructing that super trail. Or we could just continue to construct the trail that exists right now, that's being built right now. And I don't think that a swimming pool it's not a trade-off. You know, you can have a swimming pool or you can have transit. That's not how it works here. And We have the state rail plan money, we have federal money coming down to fund rail. They've already identified about 60% of the money they need for the rail project, which is way more than they've identified for the latest highway widening project. So, the money will be found if we decide we want to do it. Of course, if we're a community that says, well, maybe we want it, maybe we don't, well, then of course it's going to be harder to find funding.
I would say the bottom line is that we've built 1.5 miles of trail in 9 years. At the rate we're going, it will take about 200 years to finish the trail that Sally is articulating. And so we just need to decide. Some of us are realists, some of us are dreamers. And I think that, that's what the election is about fundamentally. It's about, do we want to get something done that everyone's going to love in a short period of time? Or do we want to continue this plan, which in fact industrializes the corridor? That picture you saw, think about that. All the trees will be gone, huge retaining walls will be built. It's not like this trail that Sally is talking about is just going to be put down with no impacts. It's going to have a huge impact on the corridor, and it's going to change it forever. So do we want to do that now, or do we want to wait until 25, 30, maybe never years from now, we actually have an opportunity to consider something that's actually buildable?
Thanks, Bud. I have a question for Sally. Does Fort propose that any of the trail that's being built now be routed into the street? Isn't the plan of record for a continuous trail?
Again, Fort is not proposing this plan, all right? This is the Monterey Bay Scenic Sanctuary Trail Master Plan. And we didn't make it up. We just, and for years, we were just sort of like the ladies auxiliary to the RTC, like, yay, let's go, do the thing. We like your project. And now it's just, because a few people, don't like the idea of transit on the corridor, it's like become this big deal. But the plan of record is almost entirely next to the tracks. There are some places, particularly around farmland, where farmers don't want cyclists through their fields, that it might be routed onto nearby streets, because it turns out there's this whole complicated thing that if a farmer finds footprints in their field that they can't identify, then it's like considered a health hazard, and they have to destroy that crop. So understandably, farmers don't want a lot of people walking, like, oh, look at it, I'll walk off the trail and go get a strawberry. And then that causes, problems for them. They don't care so much if a light rail goes through, because people aren't going to hop off the light rail to grab a strawberry while it's going by. But so there are some places where it might be rerouted to some streets, particularly in South County there, but that's going to be true for the Greenway too, because again, it's the issue about they don't want pedestrians in their fields. We're going to see what happens as each of the segments is designed and planned.
Well, the current plan of record on the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail is that 6 miles will divert. You won't be able to go over the Capitola Trestle. The plan of record is to take you into highly impacted Capitola Village instead of going across the trestle, which is the Greenway plan. Also at Buena Vista, you're supposed to go out onto San Andreas and then down West Beach. And that's why I said West Watsonville doesn't get a trail. And I want to just make one last comment about this statement that few people don't like transit. As I mentioned earlier, Greenway totally supports public transit and improvements to Metro and Paracruz. We just have a different philosophy about how to get better public transit. And it's not a few people. It's about 25,000 people now. And so we've all done our surveys. Surveys result in answers based on the questions that are asked. And that's why I'm really surprised that the Ford folks have not embraced an election. If you put up a bar chart like that shows such broad support, then Ford should be anxious for an election. It will be a resounding victory for them. But somewhat, for some reason, they're against the election. And so we trust the people. Ford will have an opportunity, No Way Greenway, that's what they named their committee, to argue against our position. We'll put our position forward and let the people decide. This is something that we've articulated from the beginning. It was part of Manu Koenig's campaign for First District Supervisor. Say, let's have an election and let's decide. It's a very divisive issue.
Okay, one final question for both of you, and thank you so much for your really great answers. There's whether or not whichever plan prevails, will the trails that are right now being planned continue to be built, or will either of these plans delay construction of those trail segments?
Well, I can start. We haven't delayed any trail segments. In fact, Sally well articulated what's coming. The segment 5 from Wilder Ranch to Davenport is funded and hopefully will be built. I don't think it's going to start until 2024, but maybe by 2025 it will be built. Segment 7B, which is from California Avenue to the boardwalk, is supposedly going to be built, but it's about $15 million. So it's going to cost $15 million because of the high retaining walls for 1 mile of trail. But Greenway has said, let all that trail be built. You know, it's good for the community, it's good for bikers, it's good for cyclists, it's good for everyone. What I think a lot of people on the west side of Santa Cruz don't understand is that the topography of the corridor changes dramatically once you cross the San Lorenzo River. And from the San Lorenzo River to Lee Road, which is why that's where 6 miles of the 18 miles detour is very, very difficult and will result in a corridor that doesn't look anything like the corridor we have today. So yes, that can continue. And the plans for segments 9, 10, 11, which basically runs from the San Lorenzo Bridge to State Park Drive and a little bit past, those segments, the RTC is working on both a trail-only plan and a rail-with-trail plan. And probably subject to the vote and subject to the cost estimates that are coming in, they will decide about which direction to go. So I don't think anything will be held up by either party going forward, and we'll see where the votes fall and where the RTC cost estimates fall.
Sally, do you have a comment on that?
Well, just the stuff I described earlier, you know, when you get down to real projects, not just projects that are in somebody's mind, there's years of planning and design and engineering and environmental review, and it's significant. It's expensive, it takes a lot of time, and then you think about all that track removal, that's going to take time. I mean, it's going to delay things for sure. It's going to delay things by several years. And it's going to, there you go. I think that's going to be the case for sure. And I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is when you have a real project of record that's had to go through rigorous review, you have something more substantial to talk about. And when it's just something that somebody imagines, it's like, well, it can be all kinds of things because it hasn't had to go through any rigorous review.
So there's a question I would like asked, and then I'll make a statement. And is there some way we can have a little have both? The question says, I think Mr. Colligan referred to transit improvements underway with power, cruise, and bus access. Could our county enjoy those plus rail and trail? And that's for both of you.
Yes, of course.
My answer would be not now. The fact of the matter is we don't have the money. And all of us have our personal finances. You know, we can afford certain things, school, things for our kids, our mortgage payment, etc. And the same thing is true for a city or a county. I hate to be the one to say this, but you know, if you don't have $1.3 billion, how are you going to pay for it? And the same is true. What will happen is that kind of spending will crowd out the existing public transit system that we have. Paracruz, Metro, even Liftline will suffer. There isn't a bucket that always is refilled with money. We have to make choices as a community. And this is the choice that we have to make. Do we want to sustain our existing public transit systems, or do we want to continue this pathway? We have seen in this county and in the cities, even with our tax rates now at the maximum, like 9.75% in some cities and counties, some at 9.25%. We can't increase it anymore by state law. We need a state exemption. So how are we going to pay for this? And there has to be a realistic assessment of what the community can afford and how we can build it. And that's what I think Greenway brings to the table.
Well, I just want to say that for all that talk about loving the metro system, Manu Koenig, the Greenway executive director that Bud advanced for the first district supervisorial position, led the charge at the I think it was January RTC meeting to remove $1 million from the Metro and Lift Line budgets. That's the commitment to Metro and Lift Line that we see when the rubber hits the road. Also, the way this funding works is it's usually a 1-to-5 ratio. So we put up $1 of local money, and then that's our local match, and then we get $5 of state and federal money. Now, sometimes the number is more, sometimes it's less. And in Monterey County, they recently only had to put up 3%, not 20%, to get out of county money for a part of their rail project. So, it varies, but that's the standard, is considered 1-to-5. So the other thing to be aware of is that the, lost my thought, went right out of my head. I don't know, it'll come back.
I think I have to say something here that Sally said, which is really unfair. Manu Koenig and the other 4 supervisors all voted to take that money and repair our roads, which currently rate an F by the state and national organizations that rate the quality of our roads. There was $11 million available to be divvied up. And yes, Metro had other ways of accessing funds that was not available to the cities and counties to repair our roads. I don't think anyone on this call can argue with the dilapidated state of our roads. And certainly all 5 supervisors, not just Manu Koenig, voted in favor of that.
Okay. Well, normally we stop at 8:30, but if anyone wants to go on for a few more minutes, we can certainly do that. Jane, are there any other questions that should be asked and answered?
There's a variety of questions. I don't know that we have time to get to all of them.
Okay. Well, I would like for each of you, if you are so inclined, to just make a closing statement for 2 minutes. Sally, why don't you?
I just think that what we need to do is not, when we're thinking about this ballot issue that's coming up, we need to be just clear what it is. This is a plan to remove the tracks and preclude a transit future for us. And if that is something that you want, if you say like, nope, never want to see rail I don't want to see passenger rail. I want Watsonville folks to be in traffic. It's like I don't want to ever see that happen. Then, you probably want to vote for the Greenway Initiative. But if you want to continue and if you want to continue building the trail that's under construction and not delay it, and if you want to have those tracks available for future transit, then you don't tear them up. And then you would vote no on the Greenway Initiative. And it's like 9 pages of legal language, and they use, there's a lot of things that are pretty confusing. And the RTC commissioners and the Board of Soups, they've all been saying, this is really confusing, we need to study it. But that's when you strip it all away, that's it. So depends on where you stand on that. If you want to see a transit future, you'll vote no. And if you want to tear up the tracks, you would vote yes.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you. very much, Brenda, for hosting us, and thank you, Sally, for your participation as well. First, want to say, I don't think that the trail advocates have established any connection between sitting in traffic on Highway 1 and a train. As I said, the ridership numbers are extremely low, and there just is no connection. So if we're going to have a solution to a problem, it needs to solve the problem, and a train doesn't solve the problem. That's number one. The second thing is, for Watsonville residents, I like to tell Carlos Palacios that by moving 600 employees to the old, what's it called, West Marine building down in Watsonville, he did more than in one fell swoop, and actually saving the county money. He did more than spending $1.3 billion on a train by moving 600 employees who won't be commuting anymore to Santa Cruz. And when people say for Watsonville, speak for Watsonville, that the jobs and the education is in Santa Cruz, sure, education is here mostly, although Cabrillo College and others are putting more facilities down in Watsonville. But the real thing we need to do is create jobs and affordable housing in Watsonville so that no one is commuting. Whether they're commuting on Highway 1 or a train, they're essentially being away from their families for a long period of time. And I would prefer that we focus on economic development in Watsonville. So from the standpoint of yes or no on the Greenway initiative, I would say, if you want a beautiful trail that everyone in this county is going to love, that's beautiful, that's safe, that's affordable, that's inclusive, right? If you want that, and you want to rail bank the corridor to preserve future options for transportation on that corridor, when and if we ever get 1.3 billion or whatever the number is, then vote yes for the Greenway initiative. If you want to continue the failed policies of the last 10 years, if you want to continue to dream about things that we can't afford, if you want essentially nothing to happen on that corridor, then you should vote no for the Greenway initiative. And it's as stark as that. It's do you want to move forward? Do you want progress? Do you want new facilities for recreation, commuting, and the outdoors and nature and spirituality and life and humanity and socialization? Or do we want to continue the same old policies and you can look at those empty tracks forever? And so that's where we are, and that's what we're going to vote about.
Thank you, Bud. Thank you both. This is, it's been enlightening. It really has.
Thank you for
I
having.
feel like this is just the beginning of the conversation. You know, there's just it's so complicated. There's so much to this issue. We could probably go on for another couple of hours to really get into the issues here. But thank you. We don't have that type of time. But
Thank you.
It's been informative. It's really been informative for us. I'm gonna ask. Oh, Peter. Peter, I don't know how to get you to talk. Let's see. Peter has something he would like to say. Peter, do you want to just put it in the chat? Or I could just read it for you.
He's saying yes, read it, please.
Okay. All righty. So it is with a heavy heart, and this is from Peter, and it's also from me. It's with a heavy heart that we acknowledge the passing of our dear friend, Reverend Daryl Darling, passed away last week. Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. It's very yeah. But Peter wants to let everyone know that there will be a remembrance table in the lobby of the RCNB on Ocean Street. That's 612 Ocean Street. And it'll be open from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock every day. So if you'd like to go by and just leave a message for the family, you're welcome to do so. So again, thank you so much, Sally and Bud, for being here. And I hope this has been helpful for all those who are in attendance. I know it's been helpful for me. I'm just as confused.
Thank you, Brenda. Good night.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody. Thank you. And thank you for the announcement about Daryl Darling. I hadn't, thank you.
Thanks. Good night.